This is Unmuted. I'm Rachel Moore. Let's dive into this month's topics of trust, marketing, and podcasting. First up, let's talk about trust. OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, rolled out version and model 5, and let's just say it went poorly. Here's why. As they rolled it out, they also deprecated the previous models for ChatGPT. Here's what that means. If you've used ChatGPT or perhaps some other AI tool, usually you're working with a specific model that helps accomplish things differently. So a basic 3 point might just be for conversational, very simple reasoning or question and answer, whereas a 3.5 might be for more complex strategy, analysis, etc. But those models all exist so that you have some options and choice. And as you interact with the AI tool that you are chatting with, if that is ChatGPT or another one, you have a chat history, much like you would have a chat history or text history on your phone. When 5 rolled out, those prior versions were deprecated, basically meaning they were disappeared. And suddenly, users who were testing out version or model 5 found that their prior chats and the history for their 3.5, 4.0, etc. had all vanished. This obviously is akin to if you have saved a file or some work somewhere and suddenly find that you can't find that file anymore, you don't have the history there, it's a pain in the ass. But what was surprising was how much this tapped into people's visceral and very emotional reactions. Users were found to be despondent. They experienced loss, anger, and even grief at losing their chat history. As you are probably aware, and if you use AI yourself, you may not use it just for work, though that certainly warrants feeling some loss and grief and even anger if your work is lost. But you may have also used it to plan a trip or a birthday or a wedding, or perhaps you were actually conversing with it because you were trying to reason something out that was very personal to you. There have been people who have turned to their chats in AI to seek counseling or advice or to even bounce an idea against it that is very fraught. So users of ChatGPT even went to such lengths as unsubscribing completely, meaning they stopped paying for their subscription. It was a mess. And Sam Altman, who is over at OpenAI, admitted as much and knows they have a lot of work to do to gain the trust back. And it also really offered the opportunity for competitors in the AI space, thinking Perplexity or Claude or even Gemini, things like that. Copilot, they really saw an opportunity to be like, oh, well, let's learn from their mistake and also try to capitalize on making sure that users of our product don't ever feel the way they felt when 5 rolled out from OpenAI. So really great lessons there to be learned for if you are going to make a major move with your product or your service, your business basically, do it right. Make sure you are not assuming. And granted, things can go wrong even if you have no intention of them going wrong. But make sure you're not making assumptions about how your user base is going to feel if you happen to take something familiar away. And that, frankly, is a lot of what trust or even mistrust in your brand can boil down to, is removing the familiar. And if you're replacing it with something that's even better than what you're taking away, you still have to manage that change and manage that they've got to adjust to whatever you're replacing it with. And humans do that very differently. So keep that in mind as you're making some major change commitments and announcements and plans for the future. Do a little bit better than OpenAI managed to do with the ChatGPT 5 rollout. Onward, let's talk marketing. Orange You Glad for Taylor Swift. So on Wednesday, August 13th, Taylor Swift, who I hope everyone listening to or watching this realizes and knows who Taylor Swift is. She's basically a line item on the United States GDP because she is such a major international star. She appeared on a podcast with the Kelsey brothers, and aside from just about breaking YouTube with that, she also declared her fealty to the color orange. Now, I have not personally been to a Taylor Swift concert, but I have heard tell that she likes to incorporate orange into her performances, her wardrobe, etc. And she said she loves the color orange. Well, if you've woken up to your favorite brands or businesses suddenly having their logos and products appear in orange, that is why. Basically, so many of them adopted and jumped onto the bandwagon and They tried to ride the trend wave of Taylor Swift loving orange by immediately turning themselves orange for a spell. Some of them are still orange. It's less than a week after the podcast, but they're still orange. Maybe your brand, you decided to turn orange. Now, we might look at that and say, well, that's completely silly. Let's assess a little bit, though, because the reason why brands did that and decided to deck themselves out in orange for an indefinite amount of time, whether we think that's good or bad or right or wrong, let's consider why people might think that. So first of all, did you turn yourself orange, your brand orange? I would love to know from anyone who gets this in their email or in their WhatsApp, or if you're commenting on YouTube, did you turn orange? And tell us why you did it. Some reasons why these brands probably contemplated if they should turn orange or not. First of all, who's their audience? Well, the interesting thing, obviously, it's hard these days to try to land on something where it's like, hey, we can universally say that that is a very, tried and true precept, a concept, a brand, an icon. According to Forbes in 2023, and granted that is 2 years ago, over half of adults in America, okay, they were considered to be Taylor Swift fans. That's a large number. Considering that, as you are looking at who you are catering to, who you are trying to put your business in front of and gain customers from, 5 out of 10 ain't bad for someone to be shooting for that. And so it could make a lot of sense to be like, well, if we're going to hit 1 out of 2 people that see us turn orange are going to know what that's for, especially after she really did almost break YouTube with the podcast that she appeared on, it might not be a bad idea. But there are more considerations. What's your brand? So you do have to consider, and hopefully if you're out there and you have a business or brand, you have some brand standards, brand guidelines. You know what your colors are. You know what fonts you use. You know how your brand, you intend it to visually be perceived by other people. If orange is already in your brand, your style guide and your colors, my God, go for it. Why not? Especially if you're like, yes, there's trend to be taken advantage of here. Let's get on there. If you're not, though, particularly, and this is major, if you had ever rebranded from being orange, I mean, you could certainly do a callback or a throwback, but you really do want to assess, is orange going to work? It might not. There might be some very solid reasons not to turn your brand orange for an indefinite amount of time. And just think about that. Like, what would be the purpose and how long would you turn yourselves orange? So these are all things to consider. Trends are certainly advantageous to jump onto, but I think really you need to come to the crux of, does it make sense for our business to hop on this? And you need to make that decision quickly. Like I said, some of these brands are still orange and it's not quite a week later. Are they going to stay that way? Hopefully not, because then it looks super grifty. Like you're just like, oh, we're just keep writing those coattails. But you need to always remember your brand is important too. And I'll always go back to a quote from my good friend Joe Wilson, who I met in social media circles. We're all famous to a few people, and you want to be famous to your people, your audience, your customers. And it's fine to say, hey, we all recognize the orange thing going on, right? Haha, we turned orange. But at the end of the day, they're going to care that you are authentically who you are and who they know you to be. And unless you're Taylor Swift, you should be true to that identity and make sure you come back to center before too much time goes by. Let's keep an eye on those brands and see how long it takes them to go back to their normal colors and normal brand style. Finally, podcasting. So this came up, was having a great discussion with one of my clients actually about the importance of audio versus video. Now, if you have a podcast for your brand, whether that is a C or B2B brand, you may be wondering like, well, we do audio right now. We've been thinking about doing video. I highly encourage you to do video if you have the means to do it. Usually it doesn't have to be overly produced, particularly if you have an established podcast. I mentioned YouTube and Taylor Swift almost breaking it with her appearance on a podcast, but YouTube is a mighty engine for you to put your podcast on. And guess what? That is a video native platform. However, video podcast being the vibe these days, podcasts were originally an audio-only format. And audio is the most easily ingestible format or aspect of your podcast for your audience to consume. Also consider, and I'm going to throw myself back here a little bit, even to being older than myself, radio was a very big deal as a medium back in the early days of media. It was often all people had. Before the invention of the television, people would have a radio and they'd sit around it and listen to it. Radio is also very important for all kinds of communities that may not be in urban areas. It's very much a touch point. It's a way for people to stay connected, informed, particularly when there might be many more miles or kilometers between where people live and how close they live together. So all of that said, audio is supremely important. And let's imagine for a moment. Let's think of your favorite TV program or sports broadcast, news broadcast perhaps, and imagine that you do have it playing on your television. And imagine that the video goes out, but the audio stays true. Now, obviously you're going to say, "Oh no, what just happened?" But you won't lose much. You won't lose pace with the story or the activity or the action going on. If the audio stays true, you still are tied in and you're able to ingest that and absorb it. Whereas if the audio cuts out, but you still have video, we've all been there where I can't hear what's going on. And unless you're good at reading lips or unless there's captions on the screen, you might have a little trouble deciphering what exactly is occurring on the screen. Now, the two are absolutely meant to marry up together and go very well together. When it comes to podcasts, though, I'm going to take a very big stance and say that audio is your most important format and a most important aspect if you're looking for your quality. Video is going to be an additive, and that's great. But your audio means that whether or not your consumer, your audience, has the video up on their screen, whether that's whatever device they're using, and they are actively watching it, or if they glance away, they're still listening and they're still there and counting as a metric for your podcast. And they're able to follow it just with their ears. So please make sure you have excellent audio. Excellent video is great as well. But if you're going to prioritize anything, it should be that audio. That's it for this month's Unmuted for August 2025. Wherever you might be ingesting this particular piece of media as an update to August for your trust, marketing, and podcast updates, please let me know what you'd like us to cover in the future. Let us know if you're listening or watching. I like to know both. In fact, just to that point, I would love to know how many of you only listened to this versus how many of you watched it actively. Do sound off and let us know. You can find Unmuted anywhere you do find and follow your favorite podcasts. And of course, we're on the YouTube channel for But Wait, There's More. And this is part of the monthly newsreel, not a newsletter, a newsreel sent out by But Wait, There's More. You can subscribe by clicking on the description in the show notes. If this got forwarded to you, do feel free to add this into your monthly inbox intake. It'll be the one email you can click on and not have to read it all. All you have to do is listen or even watch, because that's what we do at But Wait, There's More. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next month for the next Unmuted.